Bienvenido a Oscuras Revelaciones. Este es el santuario oscuro, donde la luna es testigo de secretos inconfesables y verdades perturbadoras. Aquí se desvelan historias tan sombrías y desgarradoras que desafían cualquier límite humano. Cada relato que escucharás te sumergirá más profundamente en un mundo donde el horror se manifiesta sin restricciones, donde las verdades más crueles son reveladas bajo el amparo siniestro de la oscuridad eterna. Prepárate, porque una vez que empieces a escuchar, ya no habrá vuelta atrás. That mirror, its acquisition marks the genesis of this unraveling dread. Here I sit, cocooned in the cold metal shell of my car, the familiar facade of my own house, rendered alien, hostile territory I dare not breach. A tremor lives in my hands, making the phone screen swim, but the compulsion to record this, to etch the unfolding nightmare into some permanent form while memory holds sharp, overrides the fear. Perhaps this digital testament finds understanding eyes. Perhaps dismissal as lunacy. It scarcely matters now. The telling is the thing. It began merely 3 days past. I was adrift on 4th Street, letting time evaporate before a planned lunch with my brother, when Silas's Curious and Salvage, wedged beside the skeletal remains of a laundromat, snagged my gaze. No intention drew me there, yet an object displayed within the dusty pane arrested my steps. A looking glass of formidable size, embraced by a frame of dark, age-bruised wood. Elaborate, almost hypnotic geometric reliefs spiraled across its surface. $85, the tag proclaimed. An absurdity for such apparent craftsmanship, such presence. The bell above the door wheezed as I entered. Stale cigarette smoke mingled with the cloying sweetness of furniture polish, a scent unique to places where forgotten things await rediscovery. Silas, proprietor, was sunk behind his counter, captivated by the flickering inanities of some game show on a minuscule television. He offered less than a glance when I inquired about the mirror. "Fella brought her in last week," he mumbled, eyes glued to the screen. "Said his grand passed, cleaning out her place. Needed quick coin." A flicker of unease, a question unasked. Why relinquish such beauty so cheaply? Should have surfaced. It didn't. Plastic changed hands. Arrangements were made for retrieval via my truck. Transporting it home proved a Herculean struggle. The mirror possessed an unexpected gravity, a dense inertia that fought my every effort. Alone in my 2-story dwelling, I wrestled the behemoth upstairs, knuckles scraped raw against the unforgiving wood. Finding its rightful place consumed 20 minutes of shifting and angling, until finally it rested opposite my bed, positioned to capture the nascent morning light. Perfect. That initial night unfolded with deceptive normalcy. The familiar rituals, teeth brushed, sweats donned, alarm engaged, proceeded without incident. A passing glance into the newly installed glass confirmed its aesthetic contribution. The room felt amplified, somehow finalized by its presence. Awakening arrived unwelcome, near 3 in the morning, summoned by bodily need. Shrouded in grogginess, I navigated the dim passage to the bathroom and back. It was then, returning to bed, that my reflection intercepted me. Something felt dissonant, subtly wrong, yet my sleep-fogged mind couldn't pinpoint the discrepancy. Like entering a familiar space subtly altered, an object shifted, a detail erased. Drawing closer, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I saw it. The reflected nightstand bore a glass of water, but no water had I carried upstairs. A swift turn confirmed the reality. The actual nightstand stood bare. Yet turning back, the phantom glass persisted in the mirror's world. A frantic pulse began its drumming against my ribs. Exhaustion, I reasoned. Hallucination born of fatigue. I sought refuge beneath the covers, gaze fixed resolutely on the ceiling until sleep, uneasy and shallow, reclaimed me. Morning light brought temporary sanity. The mirror, bathed in the clarity of day, seemed utterly benign. I dismissed the nocturnal oddity as a fragment of dream. Dressing for work involved the usual scrutiny of my reflected self, adjusting my tie, taming unruly hair, retrieving keys from the dresser. Reality and reflection held perfect, reassuring congruence. Nightfall, however, resurrected the discord. Preparing for bed, enacting the mundane sequence, I paused mid-motion, watch halfway onto my wrist. My blood ran cold. Standing behind me in the reflection, a woman, perhaps 60 years of age, clad in a dress the color of deep twilight. She simply stood, mere feet behind my right shoulder, her gaze fixed upon me with an unnerving placidity. I spun, a gasp tearing from my throat, nearly losing my balance. Emptiness greeted me. The bedroom was vacant. A glance back at the mirror. She was gone. My hands shook violently. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. Hesitantly, I approached the mirror, touching its surface. Cool, solid glass met my fingertips. Normal. I searched behind it, driven by a desperate need for tangible explanation. Hidden speakers? A concealed display? Finding only the wall, the mounting hardware. Sleep became a hunted thing that night. Each drift towards oblivion was shattered by a jolt of wakefulness, the phantom sensation of eyes upon me palpable. I kept my back turned steadfastly to the mirror. Dawn eventually offered a brief, troubled respite. The following day at the office was a blur of fractured concentration. The previous night's apparition replayed relentlessly. Logic strained for purchase, an unusual angle catching external reflections, warped antique wood distorting the image, stress manifesting as visual artifacts. I almost achieved self-persuasion. Then I returned home. The divergences began subtly. The mirror showed my bedspread slightly askew. In reality, it lay smooth, perfectly made. A book materialized upon the reflected dresser, absent from the physical furniture. Minor inconsistencies, easily dismissed, almost willed away, until I saw her again, the same woman. Closer now, directly behind me, so near her breath should have ghosted against my neck. Within the glass, her hand began a slow ascent, reaching for my shoulder. I saw the map of age spots on her skin, the glint of a thin gold wedding band, the chipped crimson lacquer on her fingernails. I recoiled violently, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The room, of course, remained empty. Downstairs, refuge was sought in alcohol, one drink, then another. Fortified by false courage, I ventured back upstairs, armed with a bedsheet. The mirror was veiled, its gaze neutralized. That night, the sofa became my bed, the television's drone a flimsy shield against the silence upstairs. Was she still there, behind the cotton shroud, waiting? This morning, resolve hardened. I ascended the stairs, approached the shrouded mirror with trepidation, and pulled the sheet away. My own reflection stared back, pale, exhausted, shadowed beneath the eyes. Then, a discrepancy snagged my attention. Behind my reflection, the bedroom door appeared closed. In the actual room, it stood ajar. As I watched, transfixed, the mirrored door began to creak open, wider, wider. A hand, Long fingers, nails painted that same chipped red, gripped its edge from the other side. Breath hitched in my throat. Movement became impossible. The door in the glass swung fully open, revealing her. But she was not alone this time. Behind her, emerging from the hallway's reflected darkness, swarmed other figures, shadowy, indistinct shapes, dozens upon dozens, advancing towards me with a terrifying, measured slowness. In my room, the physical door remained static. The real hallway stretched empty and silent, but in the mirror, the procession continued, their faces resolving now, men, women, even children, all sharing that same vacant intensity, arms outstretched, grasping. I fled. Keys, phone, instinct propelled me out, away. So here I remain, in my car, attempting to impose order on the impossible. The trembling in my hands has subsided enough for this frantic typing. Silas's words echo. His grand past. The urge to confront him, to demand answers. Wars with the knowledge that his shop is shuttered. Sunday's peace mocking my turmoil. Return to that house? Unthinkable with that thing presiding over my bedroom. Yet, leaving it feels equally monstrous. What if another soul finds it? A realtor guiding prospective buyers? What if they witness what I witnessed? What if a child? My phone's lifeblood dwindles. The sun bleeds towards the horizon. Hours have passed in this vigil, watching my own home, seeking a courage that refuses to materialize. Action is imperative. The mirror must be removed, neutralized. A sledgehammer resides in the garage. Perhaps destruction is the answer? But a new fear whispers. What if shattering the glass unleashes them? What if breaking the prison grants them passage into this world? Someone strolls past with a dog, their gaze lingering, questioning. I must appear unhinged, a man fixated on his own doorstep as dusk descends. Streetlights hum to life, casting an orange pallor. My bedroom window is visible from here. Is it merely suggestion, or did a shadow flicker behind the curtains? I must go back. This paralysis cannot endure. The sledgehammer, a swift run upstairs, annihilated before its inhabitants fully manifest. If this message finds you and no further updates follow, you will know the shape of the end. Wait, no, something is wrong, terribly wrong. Light flares in the upstairs window, my bedroom, but I am here, in the car. The only key rests in my ignition. The curtain shifts. A figure stands framed in the window, her dark blue dress. She is looking directly at me. She is smiling. The engine coughs to life. Destination unknown, only departure is certain. I cannot tear my eyes from the window, from her face, that widening smile. She's raising her hand now, waving. I have to drive. If you are reading this transmission, avoid Silas's Curious and Salvage. Avoid antique mirrors. Avoid my house. And for God's sake, be wary of your own reflection. You cannot know who or what might be gazing back. Transmission log, mobile device, 2347 PST. Geolocation services, inactive. Power status, 2% critical. Last known activity, 3 days prior. Three weeks passed. The first palm print materialized. Not some accidental smear, no errant streak, but the immaculate impress of a human hand. Palm, digits, the whole unsettling geometry, pressed upon my bathroom looking glass. I recall the precise instant my gaze fell upon it, for the rhythm of my heart ceased, a full 2-second hiatus. Dramatic perhaps, but utterly true. My pulse literally faltered as I stood there, shower damp, a towel slung low on my hips, confronting the impossible. Solitude defines my existence here in apartment 4B, nestled within a grand old Victorian conversion in Boston's Back Bay. That morning unfurled like any mundane Tuesday, awakening at the chime of 6:30, the ritual of coffee, the digital triage of emails, then the plunge into the shower's embrace at 7:15, prepping for the day's labor. The bathroom, predictably, was a chamber of swirling vapor, a consequence of hot water meeting confined space and reluctant ventilation. I reached for the hand towel, swiped a clear circle onto the fogged plane to facilitate shaving, and there it was, stark at eye level, that flawless manual signature etched into the condensation. Larger than my own hand, its fingers were elongated, slender, the palms surprisingly broad. Every crease, every whorl rendered with startling fidelity, as if someone had applied deliberate, measured pressure to the glass. I blinked again, then vigorously scoured the entire mirror clear with the towel. The apparition vanished. My immediate conclusion, a trick of the eye, phantoms born of steam and shadow. Yet, leaning closer, inspecting the now gleaming surface, I discerned the faintest residue, an oily ghost exactly where the print had bloomed. Someone, or something, had laid its hand upon my mirror. My gaze darted to the window, securely latched as always. The sole ingress was the door through which I'd entered, and the apartment had held only me throughout the night. A frantic tempo began in my chest. A nocturnal intruder? But why merely touch the mirror? And how bypass the deadbolts, the security system I meticulously maintained, without a whisper of alarm? That day, work received a fabricated excuse of illness. Hours bled away as I meticulously dissected every square inch of my dwelling, hunting for any sign of violation. Locks were replaced, the building supervisor summoned to scrutinize hallway security footage. The recordings yielded nothing beyond my own solitary comings and goings. Sleep that night was a fragmented, elusive thing. Each groan of the ancient structure jolted me upright. Compulsive trips to the bathroom punctuated the darkness, half expecting a silent watcher. Yet the mirror remained placid, my solitude unbroken. By morning's light, I'd nearly woven a narrative of self-deception. Stress, I reasoned, warps perception. The relentless demands of the finance world, the accumulating sleep debt. Perhaps a respite was overdue. Then, precisely 1 week later, it recurred. The identical sequence: shower, billowing steam, the wiping motion. This time, however, twin prints greeted me, side by side, congruent in dimension and form to the first, pressed into the ephemeral moisture as though someone had stood squarely before the glass, leaning in with both palms flat against its surface. Wiping them away felt futile. Instead, my phone emerged, its lens aimed through trembling hands. The initial shots were mere blurs of panic. Finally, a clear image captured. Studying it, the identical nature struck me, duplicates down to the most microscopic lineation, as if stamped by the same hand with impossible precision. It was then a detail surfaced, chilling the blood in my veins. In the absolute center of each palm resided a perfect circle, roughly the diameter of a coin. An anomaly, utterly alien to human anatomy. These circles possessed sharp, defined edges, seeming to bore deep into the phantom flesh, like apertures punched clean through. I forwarded the images to Julian, my closest confidant, attempting a veneer of nonchalance. Bizarre bathroom artifact. Thoughts? His reply arrived swiftly. Nice Photoshop, Elias. Unsettling vibe. But no digital manipulation had occurred. The prints were tangibly real, occupying my bathroom space, defying all rational explanation. My showers thereafter became abbreviated affairs, executed with the bathroom door gaping wide. A small dehumidifier hummed constantly, battling the encroaching mist. For 2 weeks, an uneasy peace settled. No further prints manifested. A fragile sense of relaxation began to mend my frayed nerves. Perhaps the strangeness had simply dissipated. Until last night. A late finish at the office deposited me home past midnight, exhaustion a heavy cloak. Yet the need for a shower was primal, a desire to sluice away the residue of a 14-hour siege of irate clients and plummeting markets. The cascade of hot water was a dangerous solace. I lingered, lost beneath the spray, time dissolving. Steam, thick and cloying despite the dehumidifier's quiet labor, saturated the air. Emerging finally, I found the mirror entirely opaque. My hand lifted towards the towel, then froze mid-motion. The condensation itself seemed altered. Darker patches marred the uniform gray, zones where moisture clung differently, disturbed. As I watched, transfixed, these patches coalesced, resolving into shapes, handprints, dozens upon dozens, blooming sequentially across the glass, a slow-motion ballet of unseen palms pressing against the barrier from the other side. Each print was a twin to the earlier apparitions, complete with those unnerving circular voids. Immobility claimed me. Breath caught in my throat. I stood, dripping, witnessing the mirror's surface become a tapestry of impossible hands. Rivulets of condensation traced paths downwards, lending the prints a disquieting illusion of movement in the dim light. Then, the sound, a wet, slick friction, like damp flesh sliding over glass, emanating from the mirror. Faint initially, it swelled, acquiring a rhythm, the cadence of something pressing, repeatedly, striving to breach the divide. The mirror's surface began to undulate, not a trick of light. The glass itself warped, rippling like water disturbed by rain. The handprints deepened, impressing further, transforming from mere outlines in steam to actual concavities in the reflective plane. Instinct propelled me backward until my spine met the cool tile of the wall. The sliding intensified, grew wetter. The hands strained inward. Fingers became discernible, three-dimensional forms extruding from the mirror's face like pallid dough kneaded from behind. The first hand broke surface entirely, extending into the space of my bathroom, long bone-white fingers questing through the air. Its skin possessed an unnatural smoothness, almost synthetic, punctuated by that flawless circular hole piercing the palm. Through it, I glimpsed the bathroom wall beyond. I fled, no thought for possessions, for clothing, a raw, primal bolt from the bathroom through the apartment door into the relative sanctuary of the hall. My fists hammered against Mrs. Albright's door until she appeared, clad in her nightdress, her gaze taking in my naked, dripping form before attempting to slam the door shut. "Please," the word tore from my throat. "Call the police. Someone's in my bathroom. Something." Terror must have resonated in my voice, for she relented, ushering me inside, offering her phone, her late husband's old bathrobe, while the wait for sirens began. The officers conducted a thorough search. Their findings were prosaic. Considerable water pooled on the bathroom floor from my interrupted shower. The mirror itself? utterly unremarkable. No prints, no ripples, no perforations. Their professionalism was impeccable, yet the underlying suspicion was palpable, drunk, or perhaps unhinged. They advised sleep, a doctor's visit if the anxiety persisted. I am at Julian's now, committing this account to screen while the horror remains vivid. He asked no questions upon my 2 a.m. arrival, merely prepared the couch, offered a beer, granted indefinite asylum. Yet the knowledge sits heavy. Return is inevitable. I must eventually re-enter my apartment, confront that mirror, because there exists a detail I withheld, even from Julian, as I recoiled from the bathroom last night. In the final instant before flight, I perceived something behind the hands. A face pressed to the glass just as the palms had been, smooth, white, featureless, save for the voids where eyes should be. Perfect circular holes, congruent with those in the hands. It saw me. An absolute certainty lodges within me. It saw me. And somehow, I know it remains there still, inhabiting the space beyond my mirror, awaiting the next rise of steam, anticipating my homecoming. Hours have elapsed on Julian's couch. Dawn creeps through his window. Soon, he will stir, inquire about my well-being, perhaps gently probe my readiness to face whatever haunts my bathroom. But how to articulate that every mirror now seems to shimmer at its periphery? That peripheral vision registers fleeting movements in every reflective surface. That earlier, using his own bathroom, I could have sworn I saw the faint etchings of fingers bloom on the polished chrome of the faucet. My phone is a compulsive anchor. I scroll through the photos captured weeks ago. Those initial handprints. They persist, stark evidence against encroaching madness, proof of the impossible intrusion. Yet, with each passing hour, the images subtly warp. The hands appear to press deeper within the frame. The circular apertures dilate. And lurking in the background, within the mirror's darkest reflected corner, a face edges nearer. The phone vibrates, mundane intrusions from the world outside. My boss, demanding my whereabouts. My mother, confirming Sunday dinner. Messages from a reality where mirrors are inert objects, handprints mere smudges, holes simply absences. That world is lost to me now, irrevocably altered by what I have witnessed, by the awareness of what waits in every reflection, every sheet of glass, every gleaming metallic surface and transient pool of water. They are all portals now, apertures to elsewhere. And something on the far side has registered my awareness of its existence. Julian is moving in his bedroom. The shower starts, a distant rush of water. Steam will soon cloud his bathroom, fog his mirror. In moments, he will emerge, wipe clear the condensation, and I must move, warn him, must. Listen. Do you perceive it? That viscous sliding sound, skin traversing glass. It emanates from this very laptop screen, the device upon which these words take shape. The screen darkens, its surface undulating like disturbed liquid, bearing marks that resemble no, 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 I must. The instant the film ejected, a certainty colder than the attic air settled over me. I'd uncorked something ruinous. What emerged from the chemical bath wasn't the tranquil sitting room I'd framed, but its savage doppelganger. The same space violated, furniture brutalized, walls marred by dark, accusing splashes. A tremor traced my spine as I gaped at the glossy square, oblivious that this was merely the overture to a fugue state where time itself would fray, knotting yesterday, today, and a dreadful tomorrow. My name is Eliza. Skepticism was my native tongue. The supernatural, a dialect I refused to learn. Phantoms belong to flickering firesides, fate to the pages of worn paperbacks. This conviction crumbled the afternoon I unearthed that peculiar instant camera in the eaves of the house I minded. I was keeping watch over the Pendleton estate, a rambling Victorian edifice belonging to a charming elderly pair celebrating 4 decades of marriage on some distant sun-drenched cruise. They'd granted me carte blanche to wander their labyrinth of heirlooms, a gesture of trust I now recognized as unwitting enablement. Dust motes danced in the slanted attic light, illuminating sarcophagi of forgotten garments, trunks brimming with sepia-toned ghosts, and furniture shrouded like patient corpses. It felt less like storage, more like a neglected wing of a museum dedicated to time itself. Then I saw it, perched on a warped shelf, incongruously pristine amidst the decay, the Polaroid. Curiosity, that treacherous impulse, bid me lift it. Its weight surprised me, a dense bakelite-clad relic radiating an aura of dormant power. Impulsively, I aimed it downwards through the open hatch, towards the sitting room below, and depressed the shutter. An unexpected whirring broke the silence before the device spat out its pale offering. I fanned it gently, watching the gray miasma resolve into an image. And the world tilted. The photograph depicted the sitting room, yes, but ravaged, upholstery clawed open, objet d'art smashed, delicate tables splintered, and those stains, a sickeningly familiar crimson. My breath hitched. Down the narrow stairs I scrambled, heart hammering against my ribs, only to find the room immaculate, serene, utterly untouched. I glanced from the impossible photograph to the placid reality, my mind reeling, unable to bridge the chasm between the two. A trick of the light, perhaps. Faulty film. I needed another test. I swung the lens towards the kitchen. The resulting image showed not gleaming countertops, but a vision of inferno, curtains writhing into black lace against incandescent heat, the stove a grotesque sculpture of melted steel. My pulse roared in my ears. Picture after picture I took, a frantic cartographer of impending doom. The garden choked by monstrous weeds. The master suite, its bed sagging under a bloom of mildew, the veranda timbers crumbling into dust. The true horror, however, awaited the moment I turned the camera upon myself. A selfie. It revealed Eliza, but not me. This version wore my face, yet it was harrowed by years I hadn't lived, threaded with silver stress, eyes wide with an ancient fear. And behind her, coalescing from the gloom, a presence, indistinct yet undeniably menacing, its tenebrous hand outstretched, reaching for her shoulder. The camera slipped from my grasp. I recoiled, hitting the wall hard, the impact a dull counterpoint to the frantic rhythm in my chest. This was delusion, surely, an elaborate, cruel jest. Yet, a chilling intuition whispered otherwise. This device wasn't merely capturing light, it was snaring echoes from the future, a bleak and terrifying one. For hours, I remained huddled on the floorboards, the dreadful Polaroids fanned around me like tarot cards dealt by a malevolent hand. Were these immutable decrees of fate, or were they warnings, malleable, perhaps preventable? As dusk bled through the windows, staining the room violet, resolve hardened within me. If these were glimpses of what lay ahead, inaction was complicity. I had to intervene. I began where it started, the sitting room. The photograph screamed violation, so I fortified it. Windows latched, bolts thrown, hefty armchairs dragged to barricade the doors. Then, the kitchen. Appliances unplugged, the gas main twisted shut, buckets filled with water standing sentinel against the phantom flames. Through the night I toiled, a solitary soldier waging war against shadows yet uncast, pruning the garden's imagined overgrowth, probing the porch for phantom decay. Dawn found me hollow-eyed, exhausted, yet clinging to a fragile sense of accomplishment. Surely I'd altered the trajectory. With hands that shook, I retrieved the camera, new exposures of each vulnerable space. I held my breath as the images swam into view. My hope withered. The scenes were identical. Chaos, fire, ruin, unchanged. Despair washed over me, cold and absolute. What use was foresight without the power to reshape? I nearly cast the cursed thing aside when a detail in the new selfie snagged my attention. The umbral companion remained, but it seemed fractionally more distant. Its grasping fingers hovered just shy of my shoulder. A spark, faint but definite, rekindled in my chest. I hadn't averted the future, but I had nudged it. Minutely perhaps, but nudged nonetheless. Maybe that was the path, an accretion of small deflections. The ensuing weeks dissolved into a fever dream of photographic prophecy. I documented relentlessly, comparing new prints to old, hunting for microscopic shifts in the grim tableaus. Sleep thinned to a frayed thread, my waking hours consumed by strategic anxieties. My obsession spilled beyond the Pendletons' property lines. Images hinted at neighborhood blight, so I instigated community cleanups under anonymous banners. I reported potential hazards, faulty wiring, unstable structures, to indifferent municipal clerks. I cajoled neighbors into upgrading smoke alarms and reinforcing locks. Gradually, agonizingly, the photographs began to concede. The depicted destruction softened, its edges blurred. In my selfies, the shadowy figure retreated further, fading slightly, its menace diluted. Yet, this relentless campaign against the hypothetical future exacted a toll on the tangible present. Friends' calls went unanswered, meals were forgotten, time lost its rhythm, measured only by the camera's whir and the slow bloom of developing dread. The house transformed into a fortress, each object positioned with defensive intent, every second a vigil. The spell shattered with a worried call from the Pendletons themselves. They hadn't been able to reach me for days, unnerved by my fragmented messages about securing the premises. Their cruise was curtailed. They were returning immediately. Panic seized me, cold and sharp. Explanation was impossible. They deemed me mad. Perhaps I was. A frantic energy propelled me into reversing my interventions. Furniture slid back to its appointed spots. Disturbed earth was smoothed, protective measures dismantled, erasing the evidence of my paranoia. All the while, I kept snapping pictures, desperate for a final glimpse, a sign of normalcy restored. And then, I saw it. The sitting room, pristine, ordered, precisely as it was before the camera's discovery. Relief surged, potent and brief, until my eyes caught it, tucked in the image's corner, almost subliminal, a familiar silhouette, its hand extended. I spun around, my throat constricting. Framed in the doorway, no longer spectral but chillingly solid, stood the figure from the photographs. Its features remained obscured, but the reaching hand was now clear. It held another Polaroid camera. As it lifted the device towards me, understanding struck with the force of a physical blow, brutal and absolute. I wasn't witnessing the future. I was trapped in its reflection, a feedback loop of fear generating fear. The shadow wasn't an external threat. It was me. The Eliza I was becoming, sculpted by this very obsession. A flash erupted, bleaching the world white. When my vision returned, the figure had vanished. On the floor lay a single, freshly ejected Polaroid. Trembling, I stooped to retrieve it. The image showed me Eliza, here and now, standing amidst the scattered photographs, camera clutched in my hand, my face a mask of dawning horror. And behind me, faint but unmistakable, stood a shadowy figure holding a camera. Clarity, sharp and painful, illuminated the path forward. I gathered every damning photograph, every tangible piece of my descent. With the camera, I ascended once more to the dusty attic sanctuary. I placed the instrument and its terrible progeny precisely where I had first encountered them. As my fingers released the cold plastic, an immense pressure lifted, as if I'd shed a physical weight. The future was a vast unknown, and that, I realized, was not a threat, but a liberation. Living under the tyranny of what might be had nearly consumed me, nearly solidified me into the phantom I dreaded. When the Pendletons arrived the following day, they found their home undisturbed, their house sitter offering a smile that felt, for the first time in weeks, entirely genuine. I offered no confession of the camera, the visions, the umbral presence. Some doors are best left unopened. Occasionally, the memory surfaces, the camera waiting silently in the dust, and I wonder if another curious hand will find it, if the cycle thirsts for a new participant. But the thought dissolves. The future isn't etched in granite. It's fluid, shaped by the present moment's choices. My ordeal taught me that grasping for control over tomorrow only imprisons you today. True freedom lies in embracing the ambiguity, in inhabiting the now. And if, in the deep quiet of the night, a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision suggests a familiar shadow, I simply acknowledge it with an inward smile and turn away. Some exposures are best left undeveloped in the darkness. The memory clings, sharp and cold as the night it unfolded. Silence in that place wasn't merely absence of sound. It felt thick, weighted. The ancient timbers of the house groaned underfoot with every shift of our weight, resonant sighs in the dim quiet. Leo and I, bone-weary from the long shift pouring coffee and clearing tables, faced the final task, reconciling the day's earnings. No need for haste, yet an insistent prickle crawled up my spine, urging speed. The very air seemed viscous, the sparse lighting inadequate against the encroaching gloom. Alone we were, swallowed by the historical building's embrace, where each rustle, each floorboard's complaint, echoed unnervingly down the shadowed halls. A dull thud near the scullery, soft but distinct, reached my ears once, then again. I forced it away, focusing on the worn bills and scattered coins, yearning for the click of the lock behind us. 6 months Elias and Leo had served coffee and pastries within these venerable walls. The building itself was a local legend, wearing its considerable age in warped floorboards and listing beams. Its layout was a meandering puzzle of rooms tacked onto rooms, shadowed recesses, and cramped corners serving no discernible purpose. Our employer had civilized the ground floor into a main dining space and a compact kitchen, but a long corridor snaked past these towards a storage room and several other chambers perpetually locked and unused. Whispers circulated among the staff, fleeting forms glimpsed at the hallway's terminus, spectral murmurs when solitude should have guaranteed silence. Some swore the place was host to more than dust and drafts. Elias, raised on verifiable truths and the tangible world, had always dismissed such tales. Trust the scene, his parents taught. Don't fret over the inexplicable. Midnight neared. The last customer had departed an hour prior. Usually, we shuttered by 10, but tonight, lingering cleanup had delayed us. Leo hunched over the till, his fingers methodically sorting currency. I cross-referenced credit slips, the silence amplifying the drone of the ancient cooler from the kitchen and the faint electrical buzz overhead. Occasionally, the heating system, roused by the evening chill that chased the day's warmth, would offer a metallic pop. I watched Leo, saw his gaze snagged by the hallway's dark maw to our left, a flicker of expectation. He froze, a brief tableau of tension, then shook his head slightly, returning to the count. "All right?" I asked. "Just tired," he mumbled, but a tremor beneath the word betrayed him. It was then I heard it too. A scritch, sharp against the quiet, abrasive, like a chair leg dragged unwillingly, just an inch or two across the wood floor. I stopped breathing, listening. Leo met my eyes. A silent question passed between us. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, setting down the bills. He gestured. "Follow." Toward the kitchen we moved, steps hesitant on the complaining floorboards. My pulse thrummed, a frantic bird against my ribs. Palms grew damp. Rationalizations warred with a rising tide of instinct. Uneven floors, the house settling its old bones. But the sound, it hadn't been random, passive. It had felt deliberate, clipped short. We breached the kitchen doorway. Everything appeared mundane. Chairs tucked neatly around the small break table. Refrigerators humming innocently. Doors sealed. Counters wiped clean. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, murmuring something about the floor. We turned, ready to retreat to the relative normalcy of the front counter. That's when the chuckle surfaced. Dry as autumn leaves, low and rough-edged. It didn't echo from afar. It rustled right there, impossibly close, beside us, intimate, derisive. Leo's eyes were stark white pools in the dimness. A primal coldness seized me, raising the fine hairs along my arms, tightening my stomach into a knot. Male? Female? Impossible to discern. Only that it dripped with amusement at our confusion. Thought dissolved. Only flight remained. A frantic scramble, limbs uncoordinated with sudden terror. We burst through the front entrance into the cool night air, chests heaving, lungs burning. Leo fumbled with his phone, dialing emergency services with trembling fingers. I stared back through the glass door, heart hammering, expecting a face, a shadow, something to materialize in the dimly lit interior. Only stillness answered, the faint lights revealing empty space. Uniformed mundanity arrived perhaps 15 minutes later. 2 officers listened patiently, their expressions professionally neutral, as we spilled the frantic tale of disembodied laughter. Had anyone else possessed a key? Only the owner and one other manager, both long gone. They entered, methodically flooding the old house with light. Beams cut through shadows, illuminating dancing dust motes in every room. They swept through the dining area, the kitchen, the long, unnerving hallway. Closets yielded only emptiness, their depths undisturbed. Windows remained securely fastened. They even checked the dusty attic space above the kitchen. Nothing, No sign of forced entry, no misplaced object, no footprints in the settled dust of the unused rooms. Everything locked tight, secure. They weren't dismissive, not exactly, but a subtle skepticism radiated from them. Just spooked by the old building's groans, their eyes seemed to say. Secure the premises, go home, call if anything further occurred. That was their counsel. The following morning, embarrassment warred with the unsettling memory, but secrets were porous things in the close confines of the cafe staff. Words spread like spilled coffee. Suddenly, hushed anecdotes, previously dismissed, gained a disturbing weight. Clara, one of the baristas, spoke again of the phantom footfalls she'd sworn she heard pacing the empty dining room after lockup. Rowan, another co-worker, had once insisted a chair near the storage room shifted on its own accord. We'd laughed it off. Now, recalling Leo's wide eyes and the icy grip of my own fear, Rowan's tale seemed chillingly less fanciful. Evenings blurred into a pattern of strained normalcy over the next few weeks. Leo and I often worked the closing shift together. We tried to maintain a facade of routine, but once the clock ticked past 9, the air grew taut, charged with unspoken anticipation. Small, inexplicable things began to occur. Cups, resting securely on shelves moments before, would suddenly tumble to the floor. Not once, but several times, enough to make us check the shelving for levelness, the temperature for fluctuations, finding nothing amiss. Sometimes, while wiping down counters in the quiet kitchen, I'd hear a whisper, formless as mist, brush my ear. I'd spin around, heart leaping, empty air. There were nights I felt watched, a persistent, unseen gaze prickling my skin, particularly when I ventured alone into the pantry, a cold, narrow cleft off the main passage near the kitchen, always seeming degrees colder than the rest of the building. One night, near closing, I lingered in the small office tucked away at the back, finishing paperwork. Leo was in the kitchen, the distant clatter of him cleaning counters a faint anchor in the quiet. The rest of the staff had departed. It had been a slow evening. The office door stood ajar, offering a sliver of view down the dim hallway if I leaned back. Jumpy, I kept glancing up from the ledger columns. Then a sound, distinct and close. Rap, tap, tap. Not the groan of pipes or the settling creak of old wood. It sounded precisely like knuckles rapping against the timber paneling just outside the door. Once, a pause, then again. I stood, heart quickening, and moved to the doorway. Left, then right. The hallway stretched vacant under the weak, flickering bulb. Shadows pooled deep in the corners, seeming darker than mere absence of light. My pulse hammered. Leo. My voice sounded thin. Silence answered, louder this time. Leo? Still nothing. Drawn by an unease I couldn't name, I took hesitant steps down the corridor, turning the corner that led towards the storage room. Its door, usually left slightly ajar, was shut fast. A faint, shuffling sound seemed to emanate from within. My hand closed over the cool metal doorknob. I twisted. It wouldn't yield. Locked. Strange. We never locked that door. Feeling foolish, I knocked softly. Leo? No one answered. The shuffling ceased abruptly. I was about to turn away when Leo's voice, startlingly close behind me, queried, "You calling me Elias?" I nearly leaped out of my skin, spinning around. He'd come from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. Relief warred with adrenaline. "Come here," I urged, pulling him towards the stubborn door. We tried the handle again, still locked solid. We fumbled through our keys, but none fit this particular lock. We'd never had cause to use one. Leo swore he hadn't touched the door all night. We stood there, baffled, staring at the inert wood, when suddenly the brass handle jiggled violently. A brief metallic spasm, sharp and frantic, as if someone on the other side desperately fought the lock. Ice flooded my veins. Leo's face went chalk white in the gloom. He grabbed my arm, pulling me back a step. We stared, breath held, expecting the knob to turn, the door to swing open. Then, absolute silence returned. The handle remained motionless. Leo reached out tentatively, tried it again, stuck fast. Fear, cold and decisive, won out. We retreated rapidly from the hallway, back towards the front. We switched off the necessary lights, locked the main entrance, and fled into the night. Sleep offered little respite that night, haunted by the phantom rattle of the doorknob. A few days later, I hesitantly brought up our experiences to Ms. Albright, the manager. Her response was guarded, but she acknowledged that some staff members had quit in the past, citing discomfort within the building. She hinted the owner was aware of something, but refused to discuss it, preferring a veil of silence over the property's rumored history. Leo, spurred by the locked door incident, suggested research. We scoured online archives and local history sites. We found references to a family residing there in the late 1800s, but no documented tragedies, no newspaper clippings detailing accidents or foul play. A local blog mentioned, almost as an aside, that the current structure might rest upon the foundations of something even older, but offered no substantiating details. The past remained stubbornly opaque, offering no neat explanation for the present unease. At work, the phenomena persisted, sporadic yet unnerving, seeming to favor the quiet moments, the solitary tasks, the late hours. Increasingly, incidents seemed concentrated around that shadowed artery near the kitchen, the passage leading to the locked storage room, the chilly pantry, and the two other forgotten chambers. Staff developed unconscious detours, avoiding the corridor if possible. Clara confessed she wouldn't fetch supplies from the pantry unaccompanied anymore, whispering of an oppressive feeling, of unseen scrutiny whenever she passed the hallway's entrance. One evening, inventory demanded another late night. Resigned, Leo and I decided to tackle it together, moving as a unit through the silent, echoing building. Clipboards in hand, we counted boxes and jars under the stark utility lights of the kitchen and corridor, the main dining area swallowed by darkness. My heart rate remained stubbornly high, every creak of the old house amplified, my senses straining for a repeat of the laugh, the tapping. Leo was just as jittery, his gaze constantly darting towards corners and doorways, expecting what? We finally finished the count, relief washing over me. Turning to head back towards the front counter and freedom, a sound snagged us both, freezing us mid-step. A low, guttural murmur emanating from near the pantry door. Indecipherable, almost subliminal, like a single word spoken under the breath. I took a hesitant step forward. The sound instantly ceased. Pushing the pantry door open revealed only familiar shelves stacked high with canned goods, coffee beans, sugar containers under the single bare bulb. Nothing out of place. No one there. Leo crowded close behind me, his presence a small comfort. We stood for several seconds, listening intently, hearing only our own strained breaths filling the small, cold space. Nothing happened. We turned to retreat, and something distinctly brushed against the back of my leg. Not a draft, not my own clothing. A fleeting pressure, a slight tug on the fabric of my trousers. A choked cry escaped me as I lurched forward, stumbling into Leo. He grabbed my arm to steady us both. I spun around, fumbling for my phone, its flashlight beam slicing frantically across the floorboards. Empty. Utterly empty. "Elias, you okay?" Leo whispered, his voice tight. Something touched me," I stammered, the words catching in my throat. Belief, stark and immediate, flickered in Leo's eyes. He'd seen my reaction, felt the jolt of my panic. That was enough. We didn't speak further. We locked the cafe with fumbling hands and fled into the relative safety of the midnight street. Days fold into weeks, marked by these unsettling interludes. Sometimes a colleague reports a fleeting voice when alone. Sometimes an object inexplicably moves or falls. A logical explanation remains elusive. I remain tethered by the need for a paycheck and a strange, stubborn refusal to be chased away by shadows and whispers. Leo stays too, perhaps driven by a similar volatile mix of fear and fascination. We talk about quitting, sometimes seriously, but always pull back. We cope now, not conquer. Vigilance has become our default state, proximity to each other our shield during the vulnerable closing hours. We move quickly through the final tasks, avoiding shadowed corners, particularly that damnable corridor near the kitchen. The approach of closing time still tightens my chest, dries my mouth, sends fine tremors through my hands. Rationality offers no solace when faced with a cold touch from empty air or a disembodied chuckle echoing in a silent room. We lock the doors, count the cash, and try to escape the deepening silence as quickly as possible. We don't linger. We don't investigate strange noises in the dark if we can help it. That is how we manage. Swift movement, heightened awareness. I still remember that sinister laugh, intimate and mocking, seeming to coil in the air beside me in the kitchen. It's burned into my memory, a chilling reminder that some places hold secrets that defy explanation, no matter how practical your worldview. And every time I hear an unfamiliar sound in the dead quiet of that old house, every time a chill crawls up my spine in an empty room, I wonder if I will ever feel completely safe within those ancient, watchful walls. That inaugural night beneath the eaves of the hilltop house remains etched sharp in memory. I, Elias, sat cloaked in the living room's unlit embrace, watching silhouettes of trees thrash against the window pane. The wind, a ceaseless entity, never paused its assault, rattling the shutters, coaxing groans from the very walls. A tension coiled in my limbs. My throat felt parchment dry. Nerves, I reasoned, the unfamiliarity of the place, a strangeness I assumed time would sand smooth. But then, as midnight breathed across the land, a different sound threaded through the gale. Not mere tempest, but a faint, warped filament of voice snagged beneath the wind's roar. I went utterly still, head canted, listening. My own pulse became a frantic drum against my eardrums. In that instant, the conviction settled. Sleep would be a denied luxury. Drawn by an anxious compulsion to investigate, I ventured onto the front porch. Its single bulb offered a pathetic, stuttering light, failing at uneven intervals. The wind's chill bit through my jacket, a raw caress against my face. Cautiously, I stepped onto the boards, eyes scanning the ground. Nothing but the hypnotic sway of grass greeted me initially. Then the wind veered, a sudden, violent shove that forced me to grip the railing for balance. I strained my ears again, yearning for the mundane, a snapping twig, the clatter of loose metal. Instead, a protracted whisper slithered through the air, so low, so devoid of consonants, it defied comprehension. Less language, more an exhaled hush that refused to dissipate. My flashlight beam sliced into the Stygian yard, probing the darkness, but revealed no movement, no source. A knot tightened in my gut. Retreating inside, I secured the lock, the click echoing unnervingly loud. Dawn brought the resolve to explore the property under the impartial gaze of daylight. Behind the house, the hill tumbled downward, terminating in a swathe of tall, sere grass, punctuated by a scattering of gnarled ancient trees. Not a dense wood, merely skeletal trunks crowned with twisted limbs. Beneath my boots, the grass crunched with an unexpected dryness, odd given the recent rains. The wind, though softer now, remained a constant companion, whispering past my ears, a persistent echo of the night's unease. It was then I discovered the peculiar etchings in the grass. Patterns resembling claw marks, yet scaled far beyond any common creature, scarred the earth in several locations. They formed shallow curves and stark lines, each set stretching several feet before abruptly vanishing. Kneeling, I pressed my palm against an impression. The soil beneath felt disturbed, loosely churned as if heavy points had been deliberately dragged across the surface. Disquiet prickled my skin. A scan of the surroundings revealed no breached fences, no tangible evidence of any large animal's passage. I tried to dismiss it, wind-loosened roots perhaps, yet the intrinsic wrongness of the shapes resonated deep within, refusing to be silenced. Evening saw me stationed once more by the window. As sunset bled across the horizon, the wind gathered force, and a palpable chill seeped into the air. I brewed coffee in the brightly lit kitchen, my hands betraying a slight tremor as I clasped the warm mug. Caffeine, I told myself. Just the caffeine. A glance outside revealed the grass bending in strange, undulating waves, the trees lurching violently with each powerful gust. Shadows flickered at the periphery of my vision, small, darting movements that evaporated the instant I tried to focus. My heart began a frantic rhythm against my ribs, the image of those bizarre ground markings flashing in my mind. Stay calm, I commanded myself. Methodically, I checked every window lock, every door bolt, before settling onto the couch with my coffee. The wind howled, louder now, and woven within its roar were those tenuous whispers, multiplied, a chorus of low, indistinct voices. Television offered no distraction. The images flickered, meaningless. A new resolve formed, one more foray outside, to pinpoint a rational source. A branch scraping siding, anything mundane. Pulling on a heavier jacket, flashlight clutched tight, I stepped back onto the porch. The beam carved a path through the oppressive night, landing on the grass. Descending the steps, I felt each wooden board groan slightly under my weight. The instant my boots touched the lawn, I registered its dampness. The wind, colder now, wrapped around me in sharp, sudden gusts. Faint rustling emanated from the trees. Then, captured in the cone of light near the yard's far corner, a small, dark shape. It moved with a jerky staccato rhythm. My heart hammered. I swung the flashlight directly onto it. The shape dissolved, simply ceased to be, as if consumed by the air itself. I stood rooted, breath catching in my throat, desperately scanning for its return. Nothing stirred. A glacial chill traced its way down my spine. I swept the flashlight beam methodically across the property line. The wind whipped relentlessly. From directly behind me, a low hiss reached my ears. I spun, light beam slashing wildly. Empty air. My pulse galloped. My breathing grew shallow and rapid. The grass whispered against my boots. Retreating towards the porch, just before my foot found the first step, I caught another glimpse. A different dark shape. this one near the tree line, seeming to float or dance erratically on the wind's currents. I struggled to hold the light steady on it, but the moment the beam found its mark, the shape vanished. Holding my breath, I scanned again. Nothing but wind-tossed foliage. I scrambled up the steps, nearly stumbling on the last, my legs trembling uncontrollably. Inside, I threw the bolt, then double-checked every latch, every window, the frantic clicks echoing the chaos in my chest. The ensuing nights fell into a grim pattern. Sunset heralded the wind's resurgence. Through the walls, those faint whispers persisted, sometimes teasing the edge of coherence, syllables almost forming, yet never resolving into sense. One night, I tried earplugs, a futile gesture. The house itself seemed to vibrate with a low thrumming transmitted through the window panes. Each morning brought fresh discoveries, more of the strange patterns inscribed upon the lawn, spreading now, migrating across different sections of the yard, always in those unsettling sets of curves and waves. A design was apparent, yet its meaning remained stubbornly elusive. My phone camera captured flattened grass, certainly, but the photos failed to convey the distinct sharp edges of the marks I saw with my own eyes. The digital images seemed blurred, inadequate. One afternoon, seeking an anchor in another's perspective, I invited Silas over. A local handyman, familiar with the area's quirks and wildlife, he listened to my account of the wind and the shapes with palpable skepticism. Together, we walked the yard. He observed the markings, yes, but quickly offered prosaic explanations. Shifting soil, perhaps deer, though their hooves left different prints entirely. I pointed out the depth, the scraping quality, so unlike any animal track I knew. He merely shrugged, unconvinced. We settled at my kitchen table as dusk deepened, sharing beers. And then, the wind began its nightly symphony. Silas paused mid-sip, his head lifting slightly. I saw it then, a flicker of unease crossing his features, the first crack in his skeptical facade. "Do you hear that?" he murmured, his gaze distant. "Something under the wind." Relief surged through me, sharp and validating. "Every night," I confirmed. He set his beer down with deliberate care. "Let's go check it out." Armed with 2 flashlights, we stepped into the blustering night. The wind struck like a physical blow, making my eyes water. Bracing myself, I moved forward, sweeping my light across the grass. Silas stayed close, his beam mirroring mine. After a tense minute, he gestured abruptly for me to halt. Leaning in, he whispered, his breath warm against the cold air. "Saw something. By the trees." We trained both beams on the spot. I caught it too, a fleeting, flickering shape, indistinct, seeming to pulse in time with the wind's violent surges. Silas took an instinctive step towards it. A part of me screamed caution, yet the desperate need to know propelled me forward alongside him. We crept closer, each footfall amplifying the frantic beat of my heart. Suddenly, Silas's flashlight sputtered, died, then flared back to life after a muttered curse. In that brief darkness, the shape had vanished. Before us lay only tall grass, writhing in the gale. He turned to face me, his brow glistening with sweat despite the chill. Words failed him. He stood, breathing hard, the easy confidence gone. "We should head back in," he finally managed, his voice strained. Inside, the silence stretched. He left shortly after, mumbling about needing to think, admitting he didn't know what we'd witnessed, but that it felt profoundly wrong. Locking the door behind him, My own hands trembled violently as I turned the key. Standing alone in the living room, I listened. The whispers seemed amplified, pressing close against the glass, imbued with a new insistence. My skin prickled, the hairs on my arms rose. An overwhelming sensation washed over me, the feeling of unseen eyes, of a presence standing just behind my shoulder. I spun, flashlight beam cutting through the familiar room, illuminating only empty walls. The following days blurred. Work offered little respite. My thoughts invariably drifted back to the hill, the wind, the elusive shapes. Each night repeated the cycle, the wind its overture, the multiplying patterns in the grass its silent testament. One morning, the mark stretched farther than ever, reaching the very edge of the dirt road that wound towards town. Driving around, I cautiously queried neighbors. A few acknowledged the hill's notorious wind, nodding to old tales of strange sounds, but none offered concrete accounts, quickly changing the subject with nervous shrugs. Back in the house, the feeling of entrapment intensified. The wind was a constant siege, granting no peace. Every creak, every rustle, sent jolts of adrenaline through me. My shoulders remained perpetually knotted. Sleep deprivation left my head feeling light, detached. Sporadic bursts of sharp clicking began emanating from within the walls, their source untraceable. The windows shuddered under assaults of wind so fierce I expected glass to shatter, yet they held, reinforcing the sensation of being sealed within a box, besieged by an unseen force. One evening, desperate for objective proof, I mounted a small camera on the porch, aiming it towards the section of yard where the shapes most often appeared. Inside, I watched the live feed on my laptop. For hours, only the monotonous ballet of swaying grass and wind-tormented branches played out. Then, near midnight, a flicker disrupted the scene, a swift, dark blur streaking across the corner of the frame. My stomach lurched. Leaning closer, I rewound, replayed. The shape remained frustratingly indistinct, too rapid, too small to resolve. It possessed a semblance of form, a fleeting suggestion of separate limbs or appendages, but dissolved back into ambiguity before my eyes could truly grasp it. I saved the footage, scrutinizing it frame by agonizing frame in slow motion, but the blur persisted. Logic warred with instinct. Perhaps it was merely debris, a leaf caught in a vortex, but a deeper certainty, cold and visceral, insisted otherwise. Sleep, when it finally came near dawn, was shallow, haunted by the howl of the wind and those phantom whispers. The next day revealed yet more scratches gouged into the lawn, forming a wide, deliberate arc near the back fence. The earth looked freshly disturbed, churned up, releasing a damp, loamy scent. Crouching, I examined the damage. Clumps of soil lay scattered. Tracing the deepest groove with a fingertip, I felt the compacted earth, evidence of significant pressure. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pictured unseen claws tearing through the grass under the cloak of night. Standing, I wiped the dirt from my hands, a tremor running through me. Evening descended with a wind more furious than any before, rattling the tin roof of the distant tool shed like angry percussion. I paced the confines of the house, a caged animal, checking locks I knew were already secure. By midnight, the tension was a physical ache in my muscles. I stood poised at the back door, flashlight gripped in one hand, the other hovering over the handle. A reckless plan solidified, one final attempt to confront whatever lurked outside, to capture clearer evidence, phone camera already recording. The moment I pulled the door open, the wind seized me, whipping my jacket against my torso. I forced myself forward a few steps into the yard, the flashlight beam bobbing precariously with my unsteady gait. My phone recorded only darkness and the frantic motion of my own hand. The wind screamed in my ears, then a soft, distinct scraping sound, perhaps 10 feet to my right. I jerked the light in that direction. There, caught in the beam, a dark form, roughly knee-high, its outline ragged, twisting within the wind's embrace. I tried to edge closer, but a ferocious gust slammed into me, forcing me back a step. When I regained my footing, the shape was gone. My breath came in ragged gasps, my palms slick with cold sweat. Turning, intending immediate retreat, I heard it, a sibilant hiss, sharp and chillingly close, right behind me. I spun again, the flashlight beam trembling violently. Nothing, only the wind tearing through the grass. My heart felt like it might rupture. Another powerful gust nearly sent me sprawling. Raw instinct took over. I bolted for the door, stumbling across the threshold, slamming it shut, fumbling with the lock. I leaned against the solid wood, chest heaving, every nerve ending screaming. My knuckles ached. I realized I was crushing the flashlight in a death grip. That night, I didn't even attempt the couch. I sank to the floor beside it, listening as the wind swirled and battered the house, the walls groaning under the strain. The whispers returned, more insistent now, seeming to claw at the very windows, desperate for entry. Lights blazed throughout the house. My phone clutched like a talisman, but the door remained firmly shut. A strange, cold certainty settled deep within me. I was not alone on this windswept hill. Something ancient, watchful, and utterly alien drifted on every gust, its presence a palpable static against my skin. I remained awake, tracking the agonizingly slow passage of minutes until the first hint of gray lightened the eastern sky. I am still here. The wind, my constant, unwelcome companion, never ceases its relentless monologue across this exposed ridge. The shapes it carries, or perhaps unleashes, continue their fleeting, terrifying dance. No explanation has surfaced, no proof tangible enough to sway the disbelief of others. But I know the truth of the night sounds, the visceral reaction of my own body to those sibilant whispers. Stepping outside after darkness falls is to confront the immediate evidence. Fresh marks scarring the dew-laden grass, dark forms flitting just beyond the reach of focused sight. The wind endures on this hill, and with every breath it takes, I feel that presence brush against the edges of my world. Hemlock Creek clung to the northern Michigan wilds. A settlement hibernation seemed to claim outside the frantic pulse of hunting season. Here, twilight didn't just fall. It shuttered the town, drawing shades over storefronts by 8. My business, an anomaly, led me to the rusted Anchor Inn, the town's solitary sentinel against the pines, a 3-story edifice whose glory days were spectral memories. Its corridors breathed a faint, damp scent, the carpets worn to ghostly threads, the wallpaper curling away from the plaster like sunburned skin. Still, it offered sanctuary, a horizontal reprieve from the road, and that was requirement enough. Check-in was a transaction shrouded in quiet peculiarity. The receptionist, Agnes, slid the brass key across the scarred counter with a distracted air, her gaze perpetually drifting towards the shadowed moor of a hallway behind her, a fleeting, uneasy exchange easily dismissed by weariness. My objective, room 215, emails, oblivion. The staircase groaned underfoot, a wooden lament accompanying my ascent to the second floor. Room 215 yielded with a sigh, revealing the expected tableau. A bed draped in a faded quilt, a stoic dresser, a small desk huddled beneath a weak amber bulb. The mattress beckoned. I tossed my satchel onto it, the thud echoing slightly in the stillness. Hours dissolved into the pale glow of my laptop screen, its low hum the only counterpoint to a silence so profound it felt architectural, pressing in, chilling the air. A prickle of awareness, the sensation of unseen eyes. Paranoia, I reasoned, scanning the room, confirming the deadbolt's solid throw before returning to my digital tasks. Midnight chimed silently while scrubbing sleep from my teeth in the small bathroom, its single bulb sputtering like a dying nerve. A sound surfaced, faint, a susurrus perhaps, leaking from the aged plumbing, or maybe the thin partition separating me from an unknown neighbor. I stilled, toothbrush hovering, listening. It faded into the building's low thrum, an old structure's protestations, nothing more. I doused the lights, plunging the room into absolute darkness, and sought the embrace of the bed. The quiet returned, heavy as a shroud. Then, on the cusp of sleep, it manifested again. A low, sibilant murmur, seemingly birthed from the very wall behind the headboard. Closer now. Intelligible syllables danced just beyond comprehension. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I sat bolt upright, straining into the void. Is anyone there? The query was a ghost of my own voice. Only silence answered, thick and watchful. The old inn settling, the wind sighing through the eaves, rationalizations warring with a primal disquiet. I slipped from the bed, bare feet cold on the floorboards, pressed an ear to the floral patterned paper. Nothing. Retreating beneath the covers, a flimsy shield, I commanded my body to relax, eyes clamped shut against the unease coiling in my gut. Sleep remained elusive. Then, a distinct punctuation in the night, a knock, soft, hesitant, yet undeniable. Not, it seemed, from the hallway door, but deeper, within the walls perhaps, or from the adjacent room. Heart leaping, I sat up again, listening with fierce intensity. Silence reclaimed the space. The bedside clock glowed. 2:03 a.m. A late arrival, fumbling for their bearings? Possible, yet the sound's quality felt wrong, muffled, internal. Calm evaded me. The darkness felt populated, expectant. Eventually, sheer exhaustion compelled me back down. Deep breaths, a mantra of normalcy, old building, tired mind. I surrendered, eyes closed. A sudden, impossible sensation. Cool air ghosting across my face. My eyes flew open. A sliver of dim hallway light sliced into the room. The door, which I had explicitly locked and bolted, stood ajar. Trembling, I rose. The corridor stretched before me, vacant, steeped in shadow and silence. I secured the door once more, the click of the deadbolt unnervingly loud, then retreated to the bed, equilibrium shattered. As I lay rigid, staring into the oppressive dark, a new sound emerged, a faint, dry scrape, like something being dragged across floorboards, originating from the room bordering mine. It began, persisted for a moment, then ceased abruptly. Enough. I slid out of bed, approached the dividing wall, and rapped softly. An exploratory query into the void. No response. Decision made, I descended to the lobby, seeking Agnes, seeking explanation. Perhaps the occupant next door had reported similar disturbances, but the lobby was a hollow space, the reception desk unmanned, bathed in the low wattage hum of emptiness. I waited, called out, my voice swallowed by the vacant expanse. Turning to leave, my eye caught it. A large, leather-bound ledger lying open on the counter, displaying a hand-drawn architectural plan of the inn. Curiosity overriding fear, I approached. Floor layouts, room numbers meticulously inked. My finger traced the lines for the second floor. Room 211, 213, then directly to 217. My gaze swept back and forth, frantic. No 215. According to this blueprint, the room I inhabited did not exist. And glacial chill snaked up my spine. I scrutinized the aged paper, searching for error, for some logical fold or tear that could explain the omission. There was none. The space designated for my room was simply wall, an unbroken line. I recoiled from the desk, the foundations of reality seeming to shift beneath my feet. Was this a dream, a hallucination born of fatigue and suggestion? I backed away, turned, and fled towards the groaning stairs, thoughts splintering. Reaching the second floor landing, I hesitated. The hallway seemed altered, the shadows pooled deeper, the perspective subtly wrong, as if the walls themselves were leaning inward. I paced deliberately, counting the doors, voice whispering the numbers like an incantation. 207, 213. My steps faltered. 217. Where room 215 should have been, there was only a continuous expanse of faded patterned wallpaper, solid, unbroken. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached out, palm flat against the cool, unyielding surface. It was real. The wall was real. And then, from the air just behind my shoulder, a breath, a whisper, too faint to decipher, but undeniably present. I spun around to face nothingness. A strangled sound escaped my lips as I turned and ran, down the corridor, down the groaning stairs, bursting through the heavy front doors into the cold pre-dawn air. I didn't stop, didn't look back, until the car door slammed shut, my fumbling hands finally turning the key. Hemlock Creek vanished in my rearview mirror, a place swallowed by pines and mystery. What transpired within the rusted Anchor Inn remains inexplicable, a terrifying anomaly I fled and will never revisit, leaving behind a room that was, and then wasn't. The memory ignites with the glare of that first day, the sun a relentless hammer on my skull across the scorched expanse. Even under the vast, open sky of the desert flatlands, the air felt brittle, used. I'd arrived crammed in a rattling conveyance, flanked by two taciturn locals, who, after depositing me near a low hump of ochre rock and wind-scoured sand, vanished back into the heat haze like figures in a mirage. A tremor, keen and sharp, anticipation, ran through my gut. Whispers, fragmented legends of ruins untouched by modern hands, had lured me here across contested borders and desolate tracts. Elias Thorne, independent scholar of the archaic, seeker of lost whispers in stone. My mind vibrated with the possibilities. Crumbling walls, perhaps, pottery shards glinting in the dust, the usual detritus of forgotten lives. Nothing prepared me for the aberrant turn, the disquieting discovery that clings to my thoughts even now, a shadow burned onto my psyche. Near the skeletal remains of a structure half swallowed by the earth, I began unpacking my kit. Much resembled the familiar ghosts of antiquity I'd chased elsewhere. Fractured ramparts, faint etchings clinging to weathered edges, the scatter suggesting a long collapsed roof. Yet, as my trowel bit into the sand banked against the eastern aspect, it struck something solid. Not bedrock, the unmistakable crown of a descending stairwell. A jolt went through me. No survey, no chronicle mentioned subterranean access here. Dropping to my knees, I brushed away the accumulated grit. The steps emerged, seemingly whole, fashioned from a dark, unfamiliar stone whose mineral composition eluded immediate identification. My pulse drummed a faster rhythm against my ribs. Fetching my torch, I angled its beam into the opening, probing the darkness. It swallowed the light. The bottom remained unseen, the steep angle hinting only at a profound plunge. Securing a line to a driven metal stake, I gripped the rope and began the descent, each footfall against the strange stone echoing with a hollow resonance that seemed absorbed by the depths. My heart hammered in time with my steps. Soon, the confining walls pressed close, revealed by the torchlight, and I halted. Inscriptions, carved symbols pulsed faintly under the beam, glyphs, certainly, yet utterly alien, bearing no resemblance to any known script from the great cradles of civilization I'd devoted my life to studying. Perhaps a localized variant, I reasoned, but the fluid, unsettling geometry of the lines felt wrong, discordant. More unnerving still was their faint luminescence, not a reflection, but an intrinsic soft glow that seemed to writhe at the edges of the carvings when the light struck them. I stretched a hand close, seeking warmth, vibration. Nothing. The stone felt cool, inert. My breath hitched, an inexplicable urge to retreat, to scramble back into the blinding sun, warred with the scholar's imperative. I forced my legs downward. The staircase coiled, the passage constricting until my shoulders grazed the cool stone, dislodging tiny chips that skittered into the unseen depths below. The air grew thick, musty, yet carried an undercurrent, a faint, sharp tang like ozone after a storm, or damp moss clinging to metal. Rounding a sharp bend, I froze. An echo drifted up from below, faint, rhythmic, like a distant sibilant chant. It swelled for a heartbeat, then dissolved back into the oppressive silence. I clicked off my torch, plunging myself into absolute black, straining to hear. Silence. No, not quite. A subtle cadence persisted, almost subliminal, like the slow, vast respiration of something ancient and enormous. It wasn't my own breathing. Goose flesh prickled along my arms, my jaw clenched tight. Air currents, I told myself fiercely. Acoustic anomalies. The rationalizations felt thin. Relighting the torch, its beam suddenly inadequate, I pressed on. Deeper now, a motif began repeating on the walls, carved with unnerving regularity. A human visage, stark and stylized, but devoid of eyes, nose, or mouth. Just a smooth, blank oval where features should be. Every few paces, it reappeared, sometimes small, sometimes large, always the same vacant stare into nothingness. A knot of nausea tightened in my stomach. I searched my mental archives for parallels, guardian figures, apotropaic symbols, but found nothing resonant. This blankness felt different, deliberate, a negation. My palms grew damp. I wiped them uselessly against my trousers, the unease a sticky film on my skin. The descent eventually ceased. The steps gave way to a level floor of packed earth and stone. My torch beam began to stutter, faltering erratically. I tapped the casing. Fresh batteries that morning, I was certain. The flickering cast a macabre dance of shadows across the carved walls. In the periphery, movement, a flicker, a shift. I spun, bathing the spot in the unsteady light. Nothing. Only another eyeless, mouthless face staring from the stone. A dry, nervous chuckle escaped my lips, sounding alien in the confined space. I moved forward, the knot in my stomach twisting tighter. A few more yards and the passage opened into a vast chamber. My wavering light swept across a high, vaulted ceiling, supported by immense cyclopean pillars. The space felt cavernous, yet strangely empty. Scattered stone pedestals stood like forlorn sentinels, their surfaces bare, awaiting burdens long vanished. Then I saw the inscriptions covering the pillars, variations of the glyphs from the stairwell, but more intricate, some lines sharp as if freshly incised, others worn smooth by unimaginable ages. A palpable weight pressed down in the chamber, the very air feeling dense, ancient. And beneath it, almost imagined, that sibilant echo returned, the chanting whisper seeming to emanate not from the depths, but from within the stone fabric of the walls themselves. I stepped towards the chamber's center, sweeping the torch beam around. The floor. It bore a massive, circular inlay. A complex spiral of lines converged, coalescing into the shape of that same omnipresent, featureless face. A sudden pressure bloomed in my chest, an invisible force pushing me back, warning me away from the design. I hesitated, wanting to approach, yet restrained by a primal certainty that stepping onto that symbol would invite consequences I could not fathom. My pulse hammered against my eardrums. Sweat slicked my palms. Enough. I had seen enough. Alone, with a failing light source and this suffocating sense of wrongness. Pushing further felt like tempting fate. I turned, retracing my steps, the feeling of unseen eyes on my back almost a physical touch. The ascent proved far more taxing than the descent. My lungs burned with the stale metallic air. My muscles felt leaden, depleted, as though I'd labored for days, not hours. The faint susurrus of the chant seemed to follow, weaving in and out of the hollow echo of my own boots, perhaps originating entirely within my own skull. At every turn, I cast fearful glances back into the oppressive dark, half expecting a figure to detach itself from the shadows. Only the blank faces carved into the walls watched my retreat. Emerging into the blinding glare of the late afternoon sun felt like surfacing from underwater. I hadn't grasped how long I'd been below. My campsite, a quarter-mile distant, seemed a haven. Relief washed over me with every step away from that subterranean maw. Yet, later, as I tried to prepare a simple meal, my hands refused to steady. My heart still thudded erratically. My mouth was desert dry. Water helped little. A protein bar tasted of dust and ash. I forced it down, attributing the tremors to adrenaline, the strangeness of the find, the need for rest. Sleep, when it came on my cot, was shallow. Clothed, I jerked awake near midnight, heart pounding, unsure what had disturbed the silence. Then the images flooded my open eyes. Not dreams, but stark, internal projections. A vast, dark hall lined with statues, figures carved in that same faceless style. And they moved. Subtle shifts, a tilted head, a slight rotation of a shoulder, always just outside the direct focus of my inner gaze. A constriction seized my chest. Sweat beaded on my brow. The tent felt airless, suffocating. I scrambled outside into the cool desert night. Only the indifferent stars and the silent dunes met my gaze, but the afterimage persisted, burned onto my retinas. Sleep offered no further refuge. I'd drift for moments, only to be jolted awake, gasping, the faceless figures closer each time. In one fragmented vision, I stood again in that chamber, on the swirling floor design, the statues forming a silent, pressing circle around me. Breathless, starved for air, I watched them lean inwards, waiting. Waiting for what? Until dawn, I paced the perimeter of my camp, busying myself with pointless checks of equipment, the knot of dread in my gut tightening with every passing hour. The following dawn brought decision, departure. I broke camp with frantic haste, loaded my vehicle and drove, pushing the engine hard across the desolate landscape towards the nearest semblance of civilization. Escape. Yet, the desert itself seemed complicit. Shapes writhed in my peripheral vision. A glance in the rearview mirror caught a flicker of movement in the empty back seat, gone when I turned. By the time I reached the dusty outpost town and its single dilapidated hotel, I was slick with sweat, nausea churning. I took a room, desperate for normalcy, for walls that weren't carved stone. Research, I told myself. Local legends, forgotten surveys. There had to be an explanation. But opening my laptop conjured only that smooth, blank visage in my mind's eye. The distant, sibilant chant seemed to echo in the room's stale air. I slammed the lid shut, head in hands, forcing slow breaths, battling a tension that had sunk hooks into my shoulders, my neck. Eating was mechanical, tasteless. My body remained coiled, trapped in the memory of the tunnel's oppressive dark. Days bled into a week. I attempted routine, contacted colleagues, described the faceless iconography, blank responses mostly, mild curiosity from a few, but no answers. The nights grew worse, the visions intensified. The Hall of Statues became a recurring nightmare landscape bleeding into wakefulness. Sometimes a phantom cold draft would caress my skin in the sealed room. The chanting whisper would surface, unbidden, triggering palpitations, short, sharp breaths, a tingling numbness in my limbs as I gripped the bed frame, fighting unseen terrors. Subtle shifts began to infect my surroundings. Shadows in the hallway seemed to stretch, coalesce. Doors resisted opening, their hinges groaning with a cadence disturbingly reminiscent of the underground chant. My phone would buzz, silence on the line, followed by the faintest impression of breathing, distant, inhuman. Once, staring from my window into the night, I saw it, a silhouette on the empty street below, featureless, looking up. I blinked, and it vanished. Rationalization became a desperate, failing shield. Psychological trauma, I insisted, an overreaction to an eerie discovery. But the phenomena persisted, sharpened. The statues flickered at the edges of my vision as I crossed my own living room, dissolving when I spun to confront them, leaving only a pounding heart and trembling limbs. The gurgle of the shower drain adopted the low, rhythmic tone of the chant, forcing me to cut the water, standing slick and shivering, straining to hear. My mind felt fractured, yet the experiences were too consistent, too viscerally real to dismiss entirely. Then the realization crystallized, cold and unwelcome. The visions weren't mere echoes, they were a summons. The faceless figures weren't just haunting me, they were beckoning, crowding closer each night in the darkness of my room, their silent presence palpable. The faint metallic mossy odor from the tunnel would sometimes fill my nostrils. I'd wake drenched in sweat, eyes fixed on the corners of the room, expecting a smooth, blank face to emerge from the shadows. My hands would shake, fumbling for the lamp, the brief flare of light offering only momentary respite before a flicker at its edge suggested shapes retreating. Panic attacks ambushed me in daylight. Concentration shattered. Reading notes from past expeditions became impossible. Random letters on the page would momentarily coalesce into that vacant oval. My heart felt perpetually strained, threatening to burst. There was no escaping it. The pressure, the constant grinding tension in my skull was intolerable, and so the decision formed, less a choice than a surrender. I gathered my equipment once more, booked passage back towards that desolate region, one final descent, a proper investigation, perhaps something overlooked, a clue, an artifact requiring removal, destruction, anything to sever this connection. Logic offered no foothold, but desperation had eroded its necessity. My nights were a siege of creeping shapes and silent whispers. Confrontation felt like the only path left, the only possible way to reclaim my own mind. Now I sit in a cramped, anonymous motel room, not far from the track leading back to that forsaken place. My hands tremble as I write this. A familiar tightness constricts my gut. The air here is thick, but the window stays shut. The desert wind's moan outside mimics too closely the echoes from below. My gear lies ready: torch, spare power cells, rope, camera, a phone with tracking apps, useless in that signal dead zone. First light is the plan. No stumbling into that site under darkness. My heart pounds a frantic tattoo against my ribs. My shoulders ache. Images of those blank statues flicker behind my eyes, waiting in the vast chamber, turning their smooth heads as I approach. My breath catches with each imagined detail, but there's no alternative now. This existence, suspended between the mundane world and those haunting visions, is unlivable. A creeping certainty settles over me. Entering that passage again will expose me to things beyond explanation. The chanting might resolve into words. The walls might reveal more than carvings. But rational fear has been eclipsed by the desperate need for release. To look upon those faceless things, whatever they are, and discover if cessation is possible. Tomorrow, I drive back, descend those stairs, confront the emptiness of that chamber. The thought sends a chill crawling up my spine, yet I am compelled. My life feels paused, held captive since I fled that place. My world has shrunk to myself and those silent watching figures, awake or asleep. Answers seem unlikely, perhaps irrelevant. I simply have to try. Failure means a lifetime of flinching at shadows. I only hope returning doesn't deepen the abyss. Yet, a cold intuition whispers that this is precisely what they desire. My return, back into their domain. This isn't just a ruin. It's something aware, something that reached out and refuses to relinquish its grip. No dramatic showdown is expected, only the necessity of stepping back into the dark. Perhaps I will finally understand what resides there, or perhaps it will finally, fully see me. If I emerge, if the self that emerges is the same one that descends, perhaps the visions will cease. Ready? No, but I am going. My body trembles, my mouth is parched, my heart races. I scan the corners of this cheap room, half expecting a smooth, featureless shape to detach itself from the gloom. Nothing, just four walls, a buzzing fluorescent light, and the ragged edge of my resolve. Tomorrow I learn if this nightmare has an end, or if, by walking back into that tunnel, into that chamber beneath the swirling sigil, surrounded by those silent pillars, I am merely beginning the final act. Soon enough, I will know. The instant the deadbolt slid home, a sickening thunk echoing in the stillness, and I saw the phosphorescence ignite in the old woman's gaze, I grasped the terrifying magnitude of our blunder. This wasn't merely a winsome bed and breakfast presided over by an idiosyncratic couple. It was a carefully laid snare, and we, witless, had ambled directly into its jaws. It began as an impromptu anniversary jaunt, conceived in the flush of our first year together. Ilara and I sought refuge from the predictable tourist trails, craving something distinct. Thus, when an advertisement materialized, touting a captivating guest house nestled deep within the undulating hills of a secluded vale, it seemed an answered prayer. Whispering Pines Lodge, it was called. The website showcased a grand Victorian edifice swathed in verdant gardens, weeping willows its sentinels. Rates were suspiciously reasonable, the few reviews positively incandescent. Without deliberation, we committed. The journey itself unfurled like a painted scroll. Urban monoliths yielded first to agrarian patchwork, then plunged into umbrageous forests stretching into infinity. As our car navigated the increasingly serpentine roads deeper into the valley, a profound sense of isolation began to coil around me. An hour evaporated without the glint of another vehicle. Miles back, our phones had surrendered their tenuous connection to the world. "Are you certain this is the path?" Ilara murmured, her eyes tracing the archaic, hand-drawn map we'd printed. I affirmed, though a seed of doubt had taken root within me. The site mentioned its remoteness. Part of the allure, isn't it? Just as retreat began to seem prudent, we rounded a final, sharp bend and beheld it. Whispering Pines Lodge stood precisely as depicted, a stately silhouette beneath a canopy of sighing pines, spectral in the waning light, a relic torn from time's forgotten pages. A venerable pair materialized on the porch as our engine quieted. They presented themselves as Silas and Agnes, the proprietors, embodying small-town cordiality with their practiced smiles and folksy mannerisms. "So pleased you found your way," Agnes intoned, her eyes crinkling into a delicate web at the corners. "We receive so few travelers nowadays." Silas, astonishingly nimble for his apparent years, seized our luggage before I could demur. "Let's get you lovebirds settled right in," he chirped, offering a wink almost too broad to be genuine. Stepping inside the lodge was akin to entering a preserved specimen jar. Antique furnishings stood sentinel. Faded daguerreotypes stared blankly from the walls. An ancient phonograph occupied a shadowed corner. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of beeswax and something else. Something indefinable, unsettling. It felt less a dwelling, more a mausoleum of meticulously arranged moments. Our assigned chamber lay at the terminus of a protracted, dimly lit corridor on the second floor. Silas deposited our bags while Agnes fussed with the heavy velvet curtains, her voice a constant low burble recounting the house's lore. "This room possesses a unique provenance," she confided, her tone acquiring an almost sacerdotal reverence. "Countless contented couples have found solace here. Some whisper the very walls exude an aura of enduring affection." I exchanged a subtly bemused glance with Ilara. It was excessive, certainly, but part of the anticipated eccentricity, surely. "Supper's at 7 sharp," Silas declared from the doorway. "We dine communally here, en famille." And with that pronouncement, they receded, leaving us enveloped in the sepulchral quiet. The moment the door clicked shut, Ilara pirouetted onto the vast four-poster bed, a giggle escaping her lips. "All right, undeniably peculiar," she whispered, "but captivatingly so, no?" I managed a nod, though the tendrils of disquiet tightened within me. "Yes." captivating. We refreshed ourselves and descended for the evening meal. The dining chamber proved as ornate as the rest of the dwelling, dominated by a long, polished table laid for four. Silas and Agnes joined us, presenting a substantial repast of roasted meat and root vegetables. The ensuing conversation flowed smoothly enough, primarily consisting of their anecdotes about the region and former patrons. Yet, an unsettling quality pervaded their delivery, as though they were reciting memorized lines from some long-running obscure play. "How long have the two of you been managing this establishment?" I inquired during a conversational lull. A fleeting, unreadable look passed between Silas and Agnes. "Oh, heavens," Agnes replied with a light, brittle laugh. "It feels like an eternity, doesn't it, my love?" Silas nodded slowly. "Time possesses a peculiar elasticity out in these hills." It wasn't precisely an answer, but before I could pursue the matter, Agnes rose with startling abruptness. "Who fancies dessert?" Following dinner, we retreated to our chamber. Elara seemed thoroughly enchanted by the entire affair, but my own unease refused to dissipate. "Don't you find them peculiar?" I ventured as we prepared for sleep. Elara shrugged, pulling back the heavy coverlet. "They're advanced in years, living utterly secluded. Idiosyncrasies are to be expected." I attempted to relinquish my apprehension, but slumber proved elusive. The old house settled around us with a symphony of creaks and groans, and more than once I could have sworn I detected furtive footfalls pacing the hallway beyond our door. The following morning, we descended to discover breakfast already arrayed upon the dining table, yet Silas and Agnes were conspicuously absent. "Hello?" I called into the silence. Only the metronomic tick-tock of a towering grandfather clock answered. We consumed our meal in an awkward quietude. As we finished, Agnes materialized, seemingly from the very shadows, causing us both to start. "Slept soundly, I trust?" she inquired, that same immutable smile fixed upon her features. "Silas is occupied with tending the grounds. I surmised you might appreciate a tour of the house." The tour proved profoundly unsettling. Each room appeared embalmed in amber, flawlessly preserved, yet utterly devoid of life. Agnes's narrative grew increasingly strange, referencing past occupants as if their presence lingered palpably. "This was little Leo's preferred alcove," she murmured, gesturing toward a window seat overlooking the overgrown gardens. "He would remain here for hours, anticipating his parents' return." "Was Leo another guest?" Elara asked, her voice soft. Agnes's smile faltered, just for an instant. "Oh, indeed, from a time long departed. Such a sweet soul." As the tour progressed, another detail sharpened in my awareness: the complete absence of modern conveniences. No television, no radio, not even a visible telephone. We concluded our circuit back in the main entrance hall, where Silas awaited us. "A splendid day for a constitutional," he announced brightly. "Why don't you young folk explore the grounds? But adhere strictly to the pathways. One can easily become disoriented out there." The undertone was less suggestion, more veiled admonition. Outside, finally afforded a moment of privacy amidst the sighing pines, Elara turned to me. Her earlier amusement vanished. "Okay, you were right," she conceded, her voice low. "This place is deeply strange. Perhaps an early departure is in order?" Relief washed over me. "My thoughts exactly. Let's pack our things and depart after luncheon. We can fabricate some urgent matter demanding our return." However, upon re-entering the house, the atmosphere shifted from merely unsettling to overtly chilling. Our room, we discovered, had been attended to in our absence. Our bags were unpacked, their contents meticulously arranged within the drawers of ancient armoires, and our car keys, which I distinctly recalled placing upon the bedside table, had vanished without a trace. "Silas, Agnes?" I called out, striving to keep the rising panic from my voice. We seemed to have misplaced our keys. Agnes appeared in the doorway, her serene facade unwavering. "Oh dear me, how careless. But do not trouble yourselves. You needn't depart. You've arrived home now." The finality in her tone sent an icy shiver down my spine. Elara's hand found mine, her grip fiercely tight. "That's exceedingly gracious," I managed, forcing a semblance of a smile. "But we truly must be getting back. Obligations, you understand." Agnes's smile remained, but her eyes acquired a flinty hardness. "Regrettably, that's unfeasible. You see, patrons of Whispering Pines Lodge, they never truly leave." Events unfolded with terrifying swiftness. Silas materialized behind her, an antique hypodermic syringe glinting wickedly in the dim light. Elara cried out as Agnes secured the lock. I lunged, attempting to shield Elara to fight back, but the substance contained within the syringe acted with brutal efficiency. As my vision swam and a leaden weight suffused my limbs, I heard Agnes's voice, now a silken, hypnotic whisper. "Resist not, my dear. Such contentment awaits, just like all the others before you." The final image imprinted on my fading consciousness was the gleam in her eyes, no longer the warm twinkle of a benevolent matriarch, but the cold raptorial hunger of a predator closing in on its ensnared quarry. How long have we resided here now? Days? Weeks? Chronos holds no sway within these walls. Time stagnates, thick and cloying. Elara and I are never permitted solitude together. They keep us sedated, malleable, adrift in a perpetual haze. Occasionally, I catch fleeting glimpses of other guests, hollow-orbed figures clad in outdated attire, drifting through the corridors like phantoms. I strive to resist, to cling fiercely to my memories, to the eroding sense of self. But the struggle becomes more arduous with each passing cycle. The insidious drugs, the constant smiling oppression of Silas and Agnes, the endless, unchanging routine of meals and tours and vacant hours spent in the parlor. It is wearing me down, grinding my spirit into dust. Yet, surrender has not claimed me entirely. Not yet. I am committing these words to paper, secreting them away in the one sanctuary they seem to overlook, within the cavernous horn of the ancient phonograph in the corner of our room. If these words find you, if you too have become ensnared by Whispering Pines Lodge, then Godspeed. Remember this: their smiles dissemble, their kindness poisons. Refuse the sustenance, reject the infusions, resist with every fiber of your being for as long as you possibly can. And should Providence by some miracle offer a sliver of egress, flee. Flee without hesitation, without a backward glance. Because once you check into Whispering Pines Lodge, they will exert every measure of their unnatural power to ensure you never, ever check out.